Hello, everybody. This is take 4 of trying to record this episode for Metuchen the Past. I am James Farley, and I'm here with my wife, Ara Farley. Ara, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, and thank you. And I'll just say it's taken forever to do this because we have 2 of the 4 children here that keep butting in.
They really do. They really, really do. So, they can be definitely entertaining. And
anyway, what is the premise of today's episode?
The premise, I am so happy that you asked. The premise of today's episode is the Forum Theater. And my question for you is, what do you know about the Forum Theater, our wonderful landmark in Metuchen?
I know that it's down the street from us and that during last summer, the mayor was able to get commissioned statues from Grounds for Sculpture that were around, and it was a Marilyn Monroe that was in front of the theater.
Yes.
I do know the theater has not had any activity, at least since I've worked/lived in Metuchen, let's say for about 10 years. So I'm interested to find out what was the theater in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you brought up that stuff because the stuff you had mentioned, we wouldn't even get close to it because we're going way back to the past. All the way back to 1927.
He was born in 1927.
I was, and I remember the early... No, not quite 1927, although it feels like it. It definitely feels like it sometimes. But so the Forum Theater itself opened up in 1928. However, its story really begins in 1927, as it was the brainchild of a Mr. James Forgione. So James Forgione had worked at the Metuchen Theater as its manager since 1923. It was a smaller theater in Metuchen that was located at 401 Main Street, which is the current location of, I am going to butcher this, Trebos Peri Peri. Do you know this place, Ara?
I do know it. It's by the Metuchen Dance Studio and by Mayan Ramen House. I think it's Mediterranean cuisine. Have I ever had it? No, I have not, but it is a busy location at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably busier than the Metuchen Theater was back in the day because that's why Mr. James Forgione wanted to move. And he had an idea to build a huge modern theater in Metuchen, which at that time was unnamed. Now, Mr. Forgione had a deal as of February 11th, February 11th, 1927, with a Mr. Samuel Goldfarb, who was responsible for building many constructions and businesses in Metuchen. However, this deal fell through. So enter Mr. Henry Rumler. So this alliance would go on to eventually form the theater that we have known and loved in Metuchen for many, many years, many decades, almost a century, in fact. This man's name, Henry Rumler, he was an entrepreneur in Metuchen who owned both Wilbert's Famous Coal, which was located in modern-day Old Meeser Park, and H.A. Rumler's Plumbing and Heating. So he kind of had the money, the deeper pockets, whereas from my research, I believe James Forgione more had the passion for the theater, but maybe didn't quite have the capital. So Rumler and Forgione created the Metuchen Amusement Company, a group described as prominent members of the community. I'm assuming if they had this group today, I would absolutely be invited to join. What do you think?
I would think that it's a shame that people can't see my facial reaction of like, what the hell are you talking about?
Oh, that's no good. I mean, honestly, I don't believe they would ask you to join because anyone that would marry someone like me probably would never be considered a prominent person. So, I guess
you just dissed yourself in that same aspect.
Anyway, so I guess neither of us would be in the Metuchen Amusement Company. But the group felt strongly that the town was in need of a modern motion picture house, and they pursued a goal to erect one on Main Street near Amboy Avenue. So in this group, Rumler was the president, Forgione the secretary, and they were also joined by other members such as Charles Carman, who was the vice president, and Frank Powell, who was the treasurer. Now, it should be noted that the company, aside from Forgione, it felt like many members of the company really wanted to get involved with the Forum as a business venture as opposed to a love of the theater. So many of the earlier advertisements and articles on it in the Metuchen Recorder talked about or encouraged the public to buy stock in the company. They said they had $25,000 worth of stock available to the community, and they wanted members of the community to buy stock. So they were shareholders, and they also wanted this theater overall to be run by the members of the community. So it was a true a theater for the community run by people of the community.
It's very interesting that it was $20,000 for the time, because that's a significant amount if you equate it to like now.
Well, it's 25,000. So they I should back up a little bit. So they valued their corporation at $50,000. The $25,000 was going to the people on the board who formed it. Forgione, Carmen, Rumler. They gave $25,000 up for sale to the public, and I believe you could buy it for $50 a share. So they weren't making people buy $25,000 worth of stock. It was.
I'm just saying that it's expensive business for the time.
It was
to ask for that.
It was, especially. I don't think the return was quite so significant. So as the Forum progressed, Forgione, it seemed he was on his own. Forgione on his own. Another great rhyme there. He was on his own when he was doing a lot of the productions, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So I'm moving to February 18th, 1927. This is a day after the official... Oh, man, my wife's putting her head down, shaking her head. It was a day after the Metuchen Amusement Company became an incorporation. And they decided that they were going to move forward and build a fireproof moving picture theater within the town. This was going to be located on Main Street and Bissett Place near Amboy Avenue. It would be the spot of the company's new theater. So the lot that they purchased was said to be 95 by 164 feet. Charles Carman of the board of directors submitted the sketches for the theater, and it was designed as a 2-story building that had a theater with a balcony. It had restrooms on each side above 2 stores that were going to be on the ground level. So the theater and the 2 stores were said to measure 50 by 130 feet, and the remaining space was going to be used as a parking lot for patrons. On Friday, August the 12th, the Metuchen Amusement Corporation announced that plans would go forward to build their new theater, and the construction, which would take about 6 months to complete, was overseen by contractor John H. Salaki. I remember back when he got that contract, and I was really proud of him. He'd worked hard, and I knew he was going to do a good job. So good for John Salaki.
Good for Salaki.
That was another, that joke, does it even the old joke? Because you said I was born in 1927, so then I would have had to be like just a few months old saying I remembered. That joke was just, we're going to edit that one out, folks. I don't know what's going on. According to the Central Jersey Home News, the theater was designed in the Art Moderne style, featuring sleek, curved surfaces, and was hailed as a modern and comfortable venue. It was equipped with a modern ventilating system that completely changed the air in the theater every few minutes. That's pretty... I don't know. That's something you probably wouldn't sell to the public these days. Like, oh, our air is actually going to be fresh as you're breathing it.
I don't think it's something anybody thinks of when they go into any theater or even retail store, because it's something that's just part of our lives now.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not like, oh, I'm going to go to this theater. I hope we can actually breathe and there's ventilation in there. But hey, the 1920s, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when you see those hotels on like Route 1 or where it will like advertise like, we have color TV, and you're like, wow, like that would have been a big draw in like 1972, but 2025 not so much. Not so much. Anyway, the theater also held a $10,000 organ that was installed by the Page Organ Company of Ohio. It also had spring seats, leather covered, and they were comfortably upholstered. I experienced those myself a few years back. They were made by the manufacturer that did the seats for the Roxy Theater in Manhattan. And it also used projection machines that had reflector-strong arc lamps that they were said to give a really detailed picture and a lighting of the screen, which was very big for the time. So this theater was going to be built for motion pictures, concerts, mass meetings, social and civic gatherings, and, unfortunately, minstrel shows. So in 1928, as we moved in 1928, it was January 19th. The Forum Theater, well, it wasn't called the Forum at the time, Forgione and Rumler, I should say, took out a quarter-page ad in the Metuchen Recorder titled, "Wanted, a name, who am I, what will you call me? Metuchen's new theater name contest." So the idea was for residents of Metuchen to submit possible names for the soon-to-be open theater. Readers were encouraged to mail their names addressed to contest editor at the Metuchen Amusement Company. Ironically, in the ad for the contest, one of the lines specifically states, "Rome had the Forum." So that it was already in the name that ended up quote unquote winning was already in this name the theater contest. They already had the Forum on there. What do you think about this, Ara? Do you think the fix was in?
I think it was fixed. I think they had an idea of it, but I know there's a little bit more backstory onto why they picked it.
Yes.
So please go ahead.
There absolutely is. And do you know who officially won the contest and who came up with the name?
Peter Dinkley.
Old man Dinkley from the 20s? No. This story was buried because, as I said, I think they already picked the name, and I don't even know if the contest I couldn't find anything that said there was ever a winner after that. But on February 10th, which was a Friday, the Metuchen Amusement Company announced that they came up with a name for their new theater on Main Street. Do you want to take a guess what this theater was named?
Oh my God. Metuchen Forum.
It was called the Forum Theater. Very, very good. And it was actually interesting in that a lot of residents of Metuchen may know that the Forum Theater, it's actually kind of cool. It was made as a combination between Forgione, F-O-R, and Rumler, which starts with R-U-M. So they kind of combine those together, F-O-R-U-M, Forum. And it also was kind of cool because it gained a lot of popularity because it had like a double entendre. So because in Rome, apparently Forum also meant like a gathering place, a public gathering place. So again, sticking with the theme of like this place is for the people. And, we're going to name this the Forum Theater. After the two, prominent owners or the people who were most invested in this, I should say. On February 24th, the newly named Forum Theater announced that they would open by March 1st. It was going to have a seating capacity of 740 and had excellent views from all seats, modern lighting, and again, let's advertise it, that famous ventilating system. So anyone worried about suffocating, don't worry. In 1928 in the Forum Theater, it would not happen. And after a minor delay, the Forum opened to the public for the first time on Tuesday, March 6, 1928 at 7 p.m., with the first show taking place an hour later at 8. The sold-out show was attended by representatives from 41 of Metuchen's organizations, as well as Mayor William Hilltop, Councilman Reniger, Compton, and Kramer, G.E. Kelly, who was the president of the Board of Education, and old W.P. Hutchinson, who was the chief of police. I was also in it. No, I'm not going to go with the old joke again. I was about to do that, but so it sounded like a pretty good time. Do you remember any other events in recent history by any chance? Because you're more up on things with the social media, the America Onlines, the CompuServes, the
Facebook,
the Facebooks, sure.
So the biggest event that's occurred is that this year actually marked the 125th anniversary of Metuchen. As his existence. So the mayor and the superintendent of the school celebrated this at Moss School, which is just a couple blocks from where we live, which was really cool that they posted it, and the children participated in this as well. Outside of that, the Memorial Day Parade is probably the only other thing that happens in town where everyone shows up to it.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah, okay. Like members of the community and stuff. I need to get more invested in that and maybe get out of the past for a minute and see what's going on in modern times. But anyway, according to the Metuchen Recorder, the crowd was presented with a newsreel that was followed by a quote-unquote fantastic sketch in color that was appreciated as a work of beauty by all present. A Buster Brown comedy was next, followed by the feature picture, My Best Girl, starring Mary Pickford. Now, in this story, Mary Pickford is in a building that gets taken over by terrorists, and she has no shoes, and she has to escape, and the terrorists shoot glass, and she has to run on glass, and she cuts... No, that's actually Die Hard. I don't know if anyone caught that. That is not that. No. So My Best Girl, it was a little less exciting. But it featured a Miss Mary Pickford who played Maggie Johnson. She played a stockroom worker who falls in love with Mr. Joe Grant, who is the son of the store manager, who is played by Buddy Rogers. Now, early on, the Forum Theater was very big on vaudeville, which is a type of entertainment that was popular chiefly in the United States early in the 20th century. It featured a mixture of, I guess you could say, specialty acts, song and dance, as well as burlesque comedy. And burlesque comedy, it often centers around absurd imitations of something. And here's where we're going into a little bit of a big ugly spot in our town's past. Such absurd imitations were the focus of a thing called minstrels, which were unfortunately part of the early entertainment at the Forum Theater, as well as a number of theaters in our area. Ara, do you know what minstrels are?
I was going to ask you what they are, and especially for those that are listening to this that might not know what they are.
So, minstrels, the minstrel show, also called minstrelsy. Anyway, minstrel shows. It was an American form of theater from the early 19th century that progressed into the early 20th century, and as I said, was unfortunately prominent around Metuchen. The shows were performed by mostly white actors wearing blackface or dark makeup for the purposes of portraying racial stereotypes, very often of African Americans. The actors in the minstrel shows initially would use burnt cork or soot to change the color of their skin, but by the 20th century, actors more frequently used shoe polish or commercially available makeup. I had said this before, and I just want to make a comment. It's like there's certain things in the past, certain types of styles, certain types of traditions where you look at in the past, and for instance, you used to go to the doctor and they would put leeches on you, thinking it was going to make you bleed, and that was going to get the sickness out of you, and that was how you were going to get better. And you look back and you say, "Wow, I can't understand that," but I guess that's what they thought back then. How did anyone not say blackface and minstrel? It's so over the top, offensive, and disgusting that how was it allowed to go on as long as it did? Like, it's one of those things where if anyone at home Googles this and you look up minstrel shows, it is disgusting. Like, there's no other word for it, really. So I don't know how it was so prominent, but apparently it was back then. Ara, your take on any of this?
It is something that is completely absurd to hear, but not sticking up for in any sort of way. It was the time. It was really what was going on in the country at that time, which was deemed acceptable.
Yeah.
And, it took people like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King to make the changes. And that happened way after the minstrels were around.
Yeah.
And even for Abraham Lincoln with slavery and just, that's Juneteenth is something different than what we're talking about. But the Juneteenth revolves around the day that the last known slave was actually set free.
Oh, wow.
And that's why it's celebrated so much. So there's just so many things that in history that allowed that to happen at the time. Is it something we would see today? Absolutely not.
No, definitely.
And it would not be acceptable in any town, anywhere that you are. Definitely not anywhere in the United States. So it would be very, you take a backhand to the face if someone knew that was happening.
At best, and rightfully so. It's just, you would deserve it. It's just really, really terrible show. It's just all around tasteless. And but as we said, it was part of our history a little bit here. And so on March 16th, the Metuchen Recorder, they had announced a group called the Hometown Minstrels. They were scheduled to perform at the Forum Theater on April 12th. However, the show ended up taking place on April 26th. Ara, do you have any idea why the minstrel show would have been moved?
The only thing I can think of is that there was some other big event happening in town.
There was, and that big event, another blackface minstrel show. This one took place at the Metuchen Centenary Church, and that was going to also be on April 12th. So to avoid going head-to-head with it, the Hometown Minstrels moved their show up to April 26th. The one, by the way, that took place at Metuchen Centenary Church was called the White Way Blackface Minstrels. Could you get any more racist and offensive than that?
Wow.
Like, I can't. Like, how did somebody not say back then, like, whoa, what are we, look, I know it's the time, but what are we doing here? Like, this is...
It's the way of the world at the time, unfortunately, and the cognitive reasoning behind things.
It was, in a lot of ways, like you said, the way of the world. And unfortunately, St. Francis Church, where, I attended CCD and attended services for many years, they had their own minstrel troupe and minstrel shows. The Metuchen YMCA had a number of minstrel shows. The Metuchen Firemen, they had minstrel shows. So if you want to say to the form's credit, minstrel shows there, from my research, only seemed to last from 1928 to 1929, and I didn't find much else after that. So if you want to say they were ahead of a curve that, it shouldn't have even been a thing to be ahead of, because it never should have happened. But if you want to say they were ahead of the curve, maybe they were, because they seemed to stop producing them, which I guess was a good thing. So throughout 1928, the Forum primarily stood as a theater for silent films. Such silent films included Speedy, starring Harold Lloyd, and Africa Before Dark, starring Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and Victor Hugo's Les Mis. Do you know who Oswald the Lucky Rabbit turned into? No. The most famous cartoon of all time.
Bugs Bunny?
No.
Oh.
It changed its species from a rabbit to a mouse.
Was it Mickey Mouse?
It was Mickey Mouse, yeah.
Aww.
There's a whole story with that. It doesn't have a lot to do with Metuchen, so I'm not going to go into it. But yeah, Walt Disney fought for the rights, ended up losing it, and no good. On March 21st, there was a show between radio stars of Metuchen. One of the stars at the Forum Theater for this quote-unquote radio show was Mayor William Hilltop. So he was the actual mayor at the time. And his partner for the theater, Scrappy Lampert. So that's such a 1920, old Scrappy here. He's getting on stage and he's going to do this radio show. So yeah, old Scrappy Lampert was up there, and they were considered to be Metuchen's own radio entrepreneurs. Also, what was kind of cool is that the Metuchen High School's graduation took place for the first time outside of Metuchen High on June 22nd at the Forum Theater. 26 students graduated from Metuchen High School, which it blows your mind, because I think last year at least 29, 30 students, I think, graduated from Metuchen High School. Their education's not as good as the one provided by St. Joe's, where this speaker went to school. So, no, I'm just kidding. I know Metuchen High is a very, very good school. Graduation, high school graduation at the Forum lasted, it went from 1928 up until 1930. So I think there was 3 graduations there, and it officially went back to the high school in 1931. Now, in 1929, shows were running 6 days a week, with Sundays off, which was and still is sort of the agreement in town to shut businesses down. Metuchen does get to be quite a ghost town on Sundays. There were daily matinees at 3 p.m. and there were 2 evening shows, one at 7 and one at 9. this is one thing I wanted to touch on. So on February 7th, the Metuchen Senior Class play performed at the Forum Theater. This play was called, can I have a drum roll, please? That's a terrible drum roll.
We have a kitchen table, and I have to hold this mic because you didn't buy a clipper to.
I do it. There are clips that's in the bag. I just didn't put them out. But yes, you're correct. My bad. My fault. It was a decent drum roll for the resources you had. So, she just kicked me. So, the name of the play was called The Tea Topper Tavern. Took place at the Forum with the tickets ranging from a whopping 50 cents to balcony seats. 4 balcony seats rather, and a whopping 75 cents for lower level seats. So prices have not changed very much. That's a pretty big drop off. I wanted to mention the Tea Topper Tavern because the plot is really quite excellent. So the plot focused on 3 college graduates who want to aid their college endowment fund. They decide to open up a tea room. Do you know what a tea room is by any chance?
It's a place to have tea.
And it's a room. You're right. It lives up to the name. So it's kind of like a small restaurant or a cafe that it specializes in snacks. You could think of, we have like Kai's here or Brewed Awakening. Like that's the vibe that I got from it, that it's that type of a place. Anyway, they decide to open a tea room for the summer, but they experience bitter trouble in finding one suitable for their desires. They eventually find a charming old house, but experience a number of unusual challenges, which makes their chaperone question the plan. After convincing the chaperone to stay, a disease breaks out, which necessitates, are you ready for this? Something we're very familiar with. The quarantining of the whole Tea Top Tavern. Dun, dun, dun. Wow, how about that? You go to a Tea Top Tavern to have tea, presumably, and you end up in a quarantine with some wacky disease. How did they even know the disease was there? And how did they know that quarantining was the answer? I mean, this is the 1920s, and there are a bunch of just graduated from college kids who are running a tea top tavern on somewhat of a whim. I don't know that they're they have the ground to really make recommendations such as a quarantine, but there it is. It was described in the reviews as a comedy that you cannot afford to miss, but you can afford to see it. I kind of like that. Yeah, you can afford. Unlike today, where a lot of the shows you just can't, you really can't afford a lot of the high quality shows anymore. But I'm referring to kind of like Broadway and shows like that.
I figured.
Anyway, to backtrack a little bit, on January 11th of 1929, here is the big story, and we're going to leave off on this. The Story of Metuchen was a film that the Forum Theater announced they were going to present. The Story of Metuchen, it was going to be known as a photo play, and it was going to be created due to an initiative by the recently formed Rotary Club of Metuchen, which was sponsoring the picture. Now, the goal of the film was to highlight the town's principal groups, organizations, and landmarks. It was going to be produced by the Supreme Production Company of Red Bank, which had made a similar film in Rahway. The president of the company, D.B. Dorn, supervised all of the work on the film. Now, next episode, I really want to get into the Story of Metuchen because I'm going to tell you, it's not exactly Citizen Kane as far as quality. And there's a lot of interesting topics to talk about and how it went down. So I think, Ara, we're going to leave the audience with a little bit of a cliffhanger here. Stay tuned to the next one, with the next podcast where we talk about the Story of Metuchen. To this date, I think it's the only movie made about Metuchen, and for good reason. The movie was terrible. Anyway, but do you have anything you wanted to add?
It's not the only thing that's been shot in Metuchen. I will say that. So look that up. There was a movie here with Anne Hathaway. Not that long ago. They did shoot in town. But outside of that, please make sure that you like and follow us on Facebook at Metuchen the Past Podcast. And there is a TikTok. It is Metuchen _the_past podcast because it wouldn't let me put the little hyphens in. There's not much going on TikTok yet, but we're going to hopefully get that down, and definitely make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, Metuchen the Past podcast.
For sure. And do we have any presence on America Online?
Who uses AOL anymore?
I'm old school. I'm not up on your CompuServe, MS, any of these things.
If you put us in the search bar, you will find us anywhere.
That sounds great. Ara handles all the technical, and I do some of the research. So, guys,
he does all the research.
I do a good amount. Yeah, it's all good. We're a team. That's what we are. Everybody, we are signing off. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Later, Gators.
Adios. Bye.